Hi, I'm JJ Behrens, and this is Dartisans episode 9. So we got a pretty awesome show today. We have Johnni Winther from Aarhus, Denmark, and he works on Dartjs. Welcome to California.
Okay.
How do you like the weather out here?
Oh, it's hot.
It's pretty awesome, huh?
Yeah.
Is it cold in Denmark at this time of year?
No, it's not cold, but it's not as hot here. The sun is really baking here. So yeah, I was fortunate not to bring any jackets. Didn't need it.
Yeah, and does the sun ever go down at this time of year?
In Denmark?
In Denmark?
It does. You have to be much further north to observe that. Yeah, that's in northern Norway, and that is 1,000 kilometers from Denmark. So yeah, it does go down. Same time around here, somewhat.
Okay, so great. We're going to talk to him about Dartjs, and we also have Todd Turnidge, who works on the VM team here in Mountain View, California, and we're going to talk about mirrors for reflection, isolates, the embedding API, some security stuff, everything we could possibly cram in.
Okay.
How do you feel about that?
Sounds good. It's the stuff I work on, so hopefully I'm ready to talk about it.
How do you feel about Aarhus, Denmark?
I've never been.
Yeah.
Well, but I like the weather here just fine.
Yeah, we should fix that. Yeah. So let's start off with some Dart news. Seth compiled these for me. Sam McCall released a Dart library for Google API services. So this is totally huge. APIs for Blogger, AdSense, Calendar, URL shortener, and so many more, including YouTube, which is where I came from. This is kind of alpha softwares, but try it out. Let us know. Go to code.google.com/google-api-dart-client. We are now up to 4 books on Dart, which kind of completely amazes me. So go check them out. Those are at dartlang.org/books. And we had a language. We started meeting about stuff that's going to happen after the M1 release. So that's pretty exciting. We're looking forward. Nothing concrete's happening quite yet, but here's some stuff we're thinking about. We're thinking about async, mix-ins, dynamic loading. I know async is one of my favorite topics, so we'll see how that all goes. We now have 64-bit binaries for the SDK. Everyone rejoice. The editor build also includes the 64-bit SDKs, and Linux users have been asking for this for a while, so we're always happy to make our users happier. Dart editor now looks inside the query method for some code completions, and that's pretty neat. If the CSS selector includes a tag name, the variable might get some type inferencing, which those Dart editor guys, I don't know how they do stuff like that, but for instance, if you do a query for an input tag, the Dart editor might be able to infer that the thing that you're going to get back is an input element. So that's pretty cool. Method cascades are now implemented across the VM, Dart2.js, and the analyzer. Did you have to work on that?
I did not.
Well, I'm not going to talk to you about that anymore.
All right.
So that's great for use cases like setting up a DOM element with a bunch of setters. So this, I like the fact that we're throwing in a little bit of syntactic niceness to solve a bunch of use cases, and just the right of syntax could really change the way you code. I mean, imagine if you had jQuery and you weren't allowed to chain methods together. I mean, it would be very painful.
Details matter with this.
Details matter a lot. Yeah. So if you haven't seen it yet, Dart engineer Bob Nystrom made a great screencast called Dart's Evil Plan to make it easier for you to build web apps. I don't know why that's an evil plan. I mean, that was kind of like the global plan.
Maybe it's aspirational. Maybe he aspires to be evil. He's actually a pretty nice guy. So he's going to have to work on being evil or something. So Bob ponders if he'll make a good supervillain. I'm guessing not if he's trying to make the web better, but we'll talk to him about that. So interest in web components is heating up. The Dart team is looking at how to build and consume web components with Dart. That's super exciting. I've been in a bunch of meetings lately about that, and totally awesome. And so if you want to get up to speed with web components, you could watch a video from Google I/O titled "The Web Platform's Cutting Edge." And I know I got to watch that because I'm a little bit behind on the game. I always focus so much on Dart and maybe not enough on the web. So we'll see. Okay, so how do you feel about telling us about Dartjs? And tell us about the team in Aarhus, because that's a long way from here. And who's out there?
Who's out there? Well, currently a lot of people actually. We put a lot of resources human resources into the project. I'm fairly new to the project, 2 months, but now the core is 6 guys, but we have included some of the guys from the IO to work on something that is at least related to Dartjs. They tend to be put where it's needed the most, and that shifts as we get progress.
It's weird. I think of the Glasgow Haskell compiler, and I think of Aarhus with Lars Bach and V8. There are these weird far north nations where apparently people don't come out in the winter and then write this amazing software. I mean, isn't that where Linux came from?
Yeah, that's even further north. Yeah.
So you guys just stay inside all winter long and just write amazing software?
Oh, it could be that's the reason why. But it seems to be that there's a really great tradition for making languages in the north, both in Denmark and Norway and Finland for that. Yeah. So for some reason it could be. Well, it's not that cold. It's just not interesting to be outside.
It's not interesting.
No, in Denmark we do not have snow really. We just have grey weather, which is cold and annoying, but mostly just, uninteresting.
Wow.
Well, further north, you have snow. You don't do that in Denmark.
Wow. And so you're working on Dart2.js. What particular things are you working on in Dart2.js? How are you using it? You doing something with Dart docs or something like that?
Yes, my first assignment was to look at Dart doc. It was using the previous version of the compiler, the Frog compiler, and I've updated, so it now uses Dart2.js. So now we are all clear and can go forward and not on the new compiler, on the one compiler for the language. So that's been updated, and in that process we've got a lot of work done on the mirror system, which I've done together with Todd. Actually exploring what is needed for the compile time part of it, seeing what do we need to inspect classes and members of types and all these relations to be able to produce the documentation.
So, I wasn't on the team that long ago, so can you remind newbies like me, why was it necessary to go from Frog to Dart2.js? What changed?
From Frog to Dart2.js? Well, actually, I don't know.
We got another new guy.
Because that was prior to me. Yeah, I came in the process of saying we are already moving towards that, and I'm part of that process moving forward.
Sorry. Mirrors. So these are for reflection, and you guys have both been working on mirrors.
Right.
What are mirrors going to allow us to do?
Well, we really have 2 aspects, because I look at compile time information. So really taking the compiler and saying, okay, let's use that for a mirror system. And the things you can ask there is, of course, if we have a walkthrough with the libraries, inspect what types are there, what functions, variables we have, and go into the types and look at what members we have. And all these static elements. Currently, we do not go into methods, so it's only the interface of things. So that's the compile time notion, and the runtime part is really Todd's side. So he's come from the other side of it, with all you can do when a program is running. The compile time doesn't have that part.
Todd, tell us about mirrors running.
Sure. Well, we've got all the declaration kind of stuff that Johnny's been talking about. And we've also got the ability to do some things that you'd expect, like invoke a method, or create a new object with a constructor, or get the value of a field, or set the value of a field. These are all, pretty much the primitive operations that you can do when you're programming. It's just here you're doing it reflectively. And, there's a lot of interesting applications you can build once you have these things, and it's really something we need to have in a language. I've done this so far. I've implemented in the VM. So, you can import Dart::mirrors in the VM and get access to the mirror system and start playing with it. But we still have yet to do it in Dart2.js at a runtime.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things that we have planned too. But those are in the future. The ability to modify code, load new classes, or modify functions or things like that.
Yeah, I guess that's the challenge of trying to support multiple environments, but. It's definitely worth it once we could start writing all of our applications, both client and server, in Dart. And we'll have the Dart VM. And, the browser's kind of a different environment, and hopefully we will get the Dart VM integrated there. But like in the meantime, it's really beneficial to get the isolates in both places.
Or the mirrors, rather.
Sorry, the mirrors. Thank you.
Ahead, yeah.
So I was talking to the AngularJS guys and about reflection, and one of the things they used reflection for was they will have a top-level function in JavaScript, and then they will just list a bunch of arguments that have standard names, and whatever arguments that you request will automatically be passed in, as a way of doing dependency injection. So, I don't think that we're trying to do exactly like AngularJS, but I think that there's going to be a lot of people out there in the world that are going to use mirrors to do interesting things.
Yeah, it's great for building frameworks where you can't necessarily anticipate what's going to happen, so you need to be able to inspect it and do something like maybe like a testing system, where you need to go and find all the test functions and call them in the order that they're declared or something like that. Mirrors is perfect for that. I mean, back when I hacked on Python a little bit, dir is very helpful.
Dir. How do you live without dir?
How do you live without dir, right? So now you can write dir, with mirrors if you want.
That's pretty awesome. I know that a lot of Ruby programmers who are going to be coming to Dart, they love the meta programming stuff. So as soon as we get the mirrors, they're going to be all over that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty exciting. So isolates. How did you get stuck working on isolates?
Well, when I started on the VM team probably about a year ago, they asked me to work on the embedding API, and it turns out that one of the primary things an embedder needs to do is interact with the isolate system, and so I ended up going from there and working on the isolate implementation inside the VM and changing some aspects of that. So that's how I got into.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That. Yeah.
Now, I personally love the isolates because I coded Erlang long ago, and I've always thought that was just the right way to do concurrency. Never been a big fan of shared mutable state concurrency, so it's definitely something that draws me to the language. So like when I've given Dart talks before, I talk about isolates kind of at a high level of what they are. But can you talk a little bit about how isolates are implemented in terms of Unix processes, Unix threads, all of that kind of stuff?
So we basically have a pool of threads, and at any given point when an isolate's running, it'll be assigned a thread, and it'll own that thread until it stops running. When it stops running, it'll release the thread back to the pool, and somebody else will be welcome to take it at that point. So we've got this thread pool. So you can have like 1,000 isolates, and if only 10 of them are running, you'll have 10 threads going. And if it bumps up, we'll actually sort of like reclaim threads slowly over time. If they're not in use, we'll sort of just say, maybe we need fewer. We'll just sort of adjust it a bit as we go along.
So the interesting thing about isolates compared to Erlang processes is that Erlang processes are a lot more lightweight. You could have 10,000 of them, whereas you're not going to have 10,000 isolates currently running because you're limited by the number of threads. But instead, we have this other business where we do a lot of asynchronous stuff within a particular isolate.
Yeah. So we're still at like early releases of Dart, and we have a lot of freedom in the future to change how we implement them, on an underlying system. And we are working on scaling the isolates. We have somebody in the group who's trying to reduce memory footprint for each isolate by doing things like sharing some of the space that's used for the code across them and a variety of things like that. We're trying to reduce our per isolate footprint as much as we can because really we aspire to have isolates feel very lightweight.
Okay.
And we're working towards that.
So do you think that in the future we will continue to have this idea where we have somewhat slightly heavier weight isolates, but lots of things running asynchronously within a particular isolate? Or do you think
our APIs are all designed around asynchrony, so I don't anticipate that going away.
Okay.
I don't know for sure.
Yeah. So can you tell me a little bit about how isolates are going to work on multi-core systems? Because I remember in Erlang, until OTP came out, I think they had a hard time running Erlang processes across multiple CPUs, and it was only when OTP came out that was possible. For us, we're going to be able to run on multiple CPUs with separate threads already, right?
It just works.
Yeah, it just works.
I mean, my box has 12 CPUs or some number of CPUs like that, and it'll happily run on them, as near as I can tell.
So can I just say that the concurrency problem is solved? here on, like I'm going to stamp it and blog it and say we solved the concurrency problem?
I don't know. You have to write down what the concurrency problem is before I can state that it's solved. It seems like a big thing to say, the concurrency problem.
Yeah.
But it'll happily run on. It just uses the OS threads, and so whatever they'll do, it'll do.
Yeah. You're right. The concurrency problem, I mean, it has many facets. I know that we just hired a guy, and he was working on SIMD integration into Dart, and that excites me because SIMD is its own different type of concurrency that doesn't really fit. But like being able to have multiple approaches to concurrency for the different tools for the different problems. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So you also you said you started working on the embedding API. Tell us about that.
All right. So the embedding API, honestly, it sort of grew.
Okay.
And when I got to the project, they'd sort of built an API that was sufficient for letting Dartium do what it needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't necessarily very consistent, and it was a little heavyweight in terms of how, when you get back a result, you had to check it for an error before you could get a handle out. And so since then, we've done a lot of work to try to make it a little bit more consistent, a little easier to use. For example, you get back error handles from these functions, and you can just inspect those rather than having to go through this two-step process we used to have.
I see.
And we're also doing things to try to make the API more, fleshed out. For example, mirrors is a great forcing function for the embedding API, because when you're doing reflection, you have to be able to do anything, a lot of things. And if you can't do them in the embedding API, then it's really not complete.
Yeah.
So we've been using it that way, as sort of a forcing function to make us be honest and make the embedding API as powerful as it needs to be.
Yeah. So I tend to fly around and give a lot of talks, and the interesting thing is almost all of the time I've spent learning Dart has been on airplanes. And so I read your C++ code on an airplane.
Okay.
And the thing that stuck out the most to me is, like, first of all, it's in C++.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I'm so used to languages like Python and Perl where, the extension API is in C. I mean, do you have any comments about having it be in C++ instead of C?
Well, the API, the embedding API, Dart API.h is a C file.
Mm-hmm.
So people will interact with it through C. But internally in a VM, we do develop in C++. And it's a strange thing about doing VM development is that you think about one language all the time, but you program in another language all the time. I mean, I remember back on other VMs I've worked on, it was sort of like, you're constantly being asked psychology questions, but you're just thinking about neurons all the time, right?
Yeah, that is
kind
of
It's just
strange.
like you're thinking about the brain, but you're thinking about it a different way. So for me, I program about Dart all day. I don't program in Dart as much.
Yeah, and you don't get a chance to use the Dart editor.
Not except for when I'm writing, regression tests or something.
Yeah.
I have to make it fail in just this way that this person managed to make it fail. They send me in some sort of, concurrent program that's, selling tickets at a stadium, if you're watching Hello. And so, I have to take that, whittle it down to a test case and make sure we don't ever break that way again.
Now, wait a second. I thought, like, all test cases would have to be phrased in the form of a dining philosopher's problem.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but they're not grabbing for chopsticks anymore.
No?
I don't know.
Okay, well, if you guys have, like, concurrency problems, please make sure to, like, format them as dining philosophers that, like...
Please don't. Send them to me nice and short.
Nice and short.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's the nice and short code. There's a bug in there. Find it.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that, we probably started out in C++ because Lars Bach, did V8 and Chrome itself is in C++, just like every other browser out there.
Sure.
Yeah. So you also wanted to talk to us about security, and I know, we wanted to be secure by, like, obscurity or something, so I didn't even put that in the description for today.
Well, since we have a public bug database,
yeah,
people are basically able to look at whatever issues we're working on. They can see the security fix that we did. They can look at the commits. It's all out there. It's an open source project, and but
it's blocked in Russia, right? Like,
we don't let any of that.
Yeah, okay, just checking.
No offense. So
I'm Russian.
All right, I'm supposed to remember to look at this camera. So the security inside of the VM, like, there's just these problems that you make all the time, which is basically numbers are not on a line; they're on a loop. if you go too far in one direction, you go negative again. It's like you get the high score on an old video game machine, and you flip it, and you got 100,000. Now you got negative 100,000.
That's happened to me a lot.
And you don't want this to happen when somebody's allocating an array. If somebody says, I want an array that's 500 million elements long, you don't want that to turn into an array that's 2 elements long, because suddenly then you don't allocate the right amount of space. They can overwrite your stack. They can do all sorts of bad things. So we've been doing stuff in the VM to try to be a lot more careful about how we handle integer overflow conditions, and especially around allocation. So I've been getting to learn about that kind of stuff and put in lots of special tests to make sure we don't there's a cliff over here, and you don't want to walk off the end of the cliff.
And you also don't want to check every 2 steps.
You don't want to check every 2 steps. Some people develop these secure integer libraries and use those, but we know that there's certain places where we get numbers from the users that are not trusted. We trust our users, but not all of them. So
not all of them.
Just kidding. So it's like you just want to make sure that you validate these inputs and that you don't do anything especially bad with them.
I'm grateful for when the VM takes care of that kind of stuff, because I remember my assembly language days, and it's like, I don't want to think about overflow. I want to be like a scheme programmer with infinitely sized integers and never have to think about that kind of stuff. So anytime you guys could save me.
Yeah, well, once you're in the Dart language, we have big integers, right?
Yeah.
Your integers aren't going to overflow in the language itself. It's just when you're programming about Dart, or when you're interfacing with the C++ code. We need to be aware of, the machine we're running on and the realities of living on a loop,
Yep.
So
I assume you've seen, third-party contributions to Dart in terms of extensions. What are your favorite extensions?
That's part of programming about Dart instead of programming in Dart. I don't have a favorite extension at this point. I have to defer to you. What's your favorite extension?
I'm kind of old school, so I heard that we had a MySQL driver, and I know that everyone else has moved on to MongoDB and everything else like that, but there's something that makes me feel, I don't know, like all the world is right when I have a MySQL
nostalgic
driver. Yeah, nostalgic. It's like, okay, I will never get stuck because I have MySQL.
Yeah, it's classic.
Yeah, if nothing else. And so, you talk about the embedding API versus the extension API. Maybe not everyone gets the difference. Tell me about the difference between those two things.
Well, the difference would be not much, honestly.
Yeah?
People basically use the extension API for their or the embedding API for their extensions. We originally wrote it as an embedding API. We thought of it that way, and then extensions were added later. It seems to work. People can do things like they can create ports that look like Dart ports as far as the program's concerned, but are backed by a C function or a C++ function or their library. So it allows them to create these sort of fake, you could almost call it like a native isolate. And so people do that kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
No, I know that, Lua is well known for having a really nice extension API. And of course, embedding API. And of course, Python has an embedding API. But for some reason, there's this conception in the world that like Lua is easier to embed. And so a lot more C programmers end up embedding Lua. Now, how important is that to us? How often do you think we're going to see, video games written in C++ that embed the Dart engine?
I don't know. I think we're making a nice language.
Yeah.
It's a language that I would like to use. And so I can imagine that other people will want to use it too in their applications. But, right now, our embedding API tends to make some decisions that allow a lot of flexibility on the part of the embedder. We allow them to provide callbacks that customize a lot of different aspects of how they interact with it. And so, we try not to make a lot of assumptions, but that means that there will be a little bit more work up front in terms of providing, okay, here's what you need to do to create an isolate, here's what you need to do this, you need to pass in these callbacks. And if you're embedding it, there's some setup. And we haven't really written a good document yet about embedding the Dart VM. I think we should.
Yeah, the whole effort I think is really good. I remember reading this long article about Smalltalk, and one of the challenges that they had in the Smalltalk world is that it wasn't so easy to integrate with the rest of the world, and I think that one of the reasons why Python was so successful is because they had a good extension API. Python, is a glue language for all these libraries, extensions written in C. Do you think we're going to be able to get to the point where Dart on the server is a really, really nice language with lots of extensions. And this is a softball question.
Honestly, having embedded Python myself in a previous life, there's some things that we have to offer. like we don't have to keep track of reference counting.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I recall that when I was embedding Python, I had to always know, was this reference borrowed or stolen? And here we don't need to, a small error can't result in your program crashing that way. You rely on a garbage collector to collect your garbage for you, and that's nice from an embedder's standpoint. I really appreciate that. Another thing was, Python has this global interpreter lock.
Really?
Yeah. But
I think 50 blog posts just went up about it right now.
Okay, sorry. No, but I like the feel of using that language and embedding it, and I hope that we can make a language that other people want to embed in their things, and I hope to be successful there. That would make me feel really good if we have a lot of users of the embedding API, and if we cut off some of these sharp corners and make it a lot easier for them to do what they want to do. So that'd be really nice.
Now, are you working on a special format for the documents that make it easier to read on a plane? Because I'd be down with that. So Did you work on? So you worked on the Dartium integration of the VM?
I work a lot with the people on the Dartium team. Yeah.
Okay, so do you have a feel for how difficult it was to integrate?
They already had something running when I joined the team.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but what I'll do is I'll go along and I'll break their build all the time. Not quite,
but that's the job, right?
I want to make incompatible changes to the API to make it better. And now is easier than it's ever going to be in the future. So, we've gone through and made lots of incompatible changes, and then we go and have to make sure that we coordinate with them to make sure that they can get their changes in as quickly as possible. So.
Yeah, I like to make incompatible changes to the API because I'm in developer relations, and that's how I relate to people.
Is by telling them how you've broken them?
Yes, it's like, hey, I broke your API. Nice to meet you. Let's talk.
But right now we're in a time of a lot of change in the project, and we're trying to break things now so that we can get things on a more nice, stable platform going forward from M1.
Yeah. So another thing, getting back to the isolates, I know that we were talking today in a meeting about using synchronous isolates within the single UI thread in order to talk to JavaScript interoperability.
Yeah, we're working on this stuff right now. I'm not part of those. The discussions are all happening in Denmark. So, but it is. Clearly JavaScript interoperability is something that a lot of people ask about. It's important to a lot of people. We need to have a really clear story about that. I'm not part of the group working on that, but we want to make it a very natural thing to be able to reuse code that you already have that's useful. It's part of getting acceptance is making something that people can interface with the blocks they've already got.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes because I know we have this idea of running isolates in separate web workers, but we also have this idea of synchronous isolates to isolate various JavaScript widgets or whatever so that they're segmented. And so we have this idea of an isolate, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with all the different use cases.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, so I know we have some questions, so let me get to them. What kind of new tooling libraries could we see emerging from the Dart team when Mirrors has landed? Crystal ball time. What do you think? New tooling libraries.
One thing that's been being added as part of the job Todd and I have done, or I am doing now, is really the ability to inspect the static part of the code. So it feels natural to do something there that you can actually inspect code, directly run the compiler and inspect the class hierarchy and that stuff. And so that seems to be...
Yeah, you can write custom analyzers on top of that kind of thing.
And to start with, it's the external structure, so that's really being able to browse the class hierarchy, which is a good thing. Being able to find stuff. If you don't find the Dart doc good enough, you can actually write one that is better on top of this. So
I know we also kind of answered this earlier when you were talking about testing tools, and I was talking about AngularJS's approach to dependency injection. So I think it actually opens up a lot of worlds.
Yeah, it's really an important part of today's programming languages being able to reflect. We need it.
Yeah, great. So will isolate support transferable objects like Chrome with with the type arrays in the workers. I heard that we were switching to Corba. Okay. Some people out there are going to be laughing.
Okay.
They're C++ programmers.
Yeah, I didn't hear that.
Oh, well, maybe it's not true.
I talked to Carl on my team, who'd probably be the one who'd be responsible for handling that kind of thing, and he said the answer to that is yes.
Yes.
I mean, he said probably yes.
Oh, wow, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like what about the dynamic code loading and...
Well, the transferable objects or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, are there still plans to spawn isolates on the client from the server? If so, will low latency, low bandwidth use on the goals for that? Will it use WebSockets for the communication?
I don't know how we're going to implement this, particularly in the browser. I work on the VM a lot.
Yeah.
But I do know that we are looking at evolving the isolate API quite a bit going forward, and part of that would most certainly involve being able to interact with an isolate that's remote.
Yeah.
Being able to name this isolate and talk to it, respond to failures. That's a huge thing that actually I probably should have said earlier about the isolate API, is that right now, you have an isolate that you've spawned and it goes and dies. And what happens? Well, right now, if you're inside standalone VM running on a command line, it takes down your whole VM.
Oh.
Does that seem like a good way to build a system?
You're going to fix that, right?
We're going to fix that. So we need to be able to handle the fact that I'm talking to a port, but the port is closed. Why is it closed? How can I respond to this? What do I want to do? Do I want to shut myself down? Do I want to shut down some other isolates? I'm going to need to be able to interact with isolates in a more nuanced way, more like the way that, say, you could do in Erlang or something.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you, are we going to, do something like Erlang OTP, where we have, isolates on multiple machines talking to each other and failovers and, watchdogs, all that kind of stuff?
I can't speak to the exact architecture, but we certainly need to solve that problem.
Are you going to have it by next week?
No.
Oh, wow.
Jeez. Yes.
Okay. Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. So, what's the difference? Well, we've circled around this a lot. What are the difference between Erlang actors and Dart isolates? Are there any plans to build Erlang OTP-like framework on Dart? Wow.
Sounds familiar.
That's strange.
I mean, certainly they have a lot of good features.
Yeah.
We should be looking at our isolates. Right now they're pretty bare bones, and we should be thinking about what it is that we need to add so that we can build reliable systems on top of these things.
Now, I'm generally pretty forgiving about syntax, and I like coding in a lot of languages, but I do happen to like Dart syntax a little bit better than Erlang.
I haven't programmed in Erlang, so and besides, I program about Dart.
Yeah. I would have to say that I always joke that Erlang has syntax that only a compiler writer could love. So most of my programming work is developing either COM server DLLs or .NET class libraries, exposing a certain interface to external Windows applications. Would you think it is feasible to wrap the Dart VM such that it could be used for this? Oh, what a perfect question.
I think it'd be feasible to embed the Dart VM and use it in a variety of contexts. Yeah. I mean, we haven't written a nice guide for how to do it step by step, but our code's all public, so you can look at how we're doing it in a variety of projects right now. Particularly the standalone VM is probably the simplest embedding. If you look at how we're doing it there and you're, clever, you might be able to figure out how to do it on your own. So
knowing that you code in Emacs, I have a suspicion you're going to have a hard time debugging the Visual Studio build problems that are inevitably going to come up.
No comment.
So how would Dart handle environment-specific implementations of libraries, e.g. select native extensions in the VM and pure Dart in the browser? I kind of have an answer to this. What do you think? Do you guys have any answers?
I mean, we've been thinking about how to share our core library code a lot lately and mark certain parts of it as being external and provided by a particular platform. And we're trying to share as much code as possible. And we have actually sort of a library unification project going on right now where, there's a Dart to JS version of this and the VM version of this, and that's clearly not great. We'd rather have one version that had as much code shared as we possibly could so people know what to look at. They say, I want to know what a list does. It's nice to be able to go look at list, see what a list is, and then we can patch some, tiny little native bits in the VM or in Dart2JS or what have you.
Yeah, so I don't have a perfect answer for this, but I know that I do believe they're working on this in Aarhus, the big library reorg.
Yeah, well, one of the things about this is really, as you said, it currently have several implementations, and actually with that, several interfaces of those implementations. And the first step is really to say, well, we should have one interface of saying do we have an implementation for this, even though it might have different, several interfaces. One interface for several implementations. Currently, it's just several implementations, and depending on where you point, and that's really depending on who you talk to. Do you talk to Dartjs? Do you talk to the VM? Do you talk to the editor? It might actually say something that is different, and we have to get a unified answer on this, so we know that, well, this is the interface for it. How we implemented that would be the problem for us, but it's one unified interface.
Yes,
so that's work going on for that, and so that's really pushed up front now.
Yeah. Wow, I'm disappointed that you guys didn't wait for it to be perfect before shipping it. I mean, okay.
No.
So when will we have feature parity when using mirrors on the VM versus Dart2JS? Can we give like a calendar date? Like we're down to the hour?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if we've really started the runtime implementation of mirrors on Dart2JS.
I haven't seen any, so I don't think we have done anything. Well, like there could be some work on just providing runtime type information, which is really the startup point for it. But there's a whole lot of mechanism that has to be implemented just to do the compile time interface of it.
Do we plan on doing it eventually?
I haven't heard any schedule on
the mirrors
on any scheduling of when. I think in time, yes, but when? No.
I can give you a little bit of background here, just sort of on a human level. What happened is we knew we wanted mirrors. And the guy I sit next to is the guy who basically, Gilad Brock, he does a lot of our language specification work, but he also is very interested in reflection. And so he'd come up with an interface. He said, we should have this interface. So I said, okay, let's implement it on a VM and let it bake a little bit and see if we like it.
I see.
And so we're still in that like baking phase. And we haven't gotten to the, everybody else wants to eat this pie, we should put it in the Dart2JS oven phase yet.
Yeah, I guess that theory is a lot better than my theory.
But I can take that as feedback to the team that perhaps we should think about.
Yeah, that is good feedback.
When we're going to do this. I don't know what, we can't promise.
Yeah.
But it's a good idea to have it. Parity be useful, because otherwise it's hard to write code.
It'll come. It's just a matter of time. My theory was that it's summer in Denmark. Everyone wants to go outside, and we have to wait till it gets a little bit colder before all these things will just like come out, all of them at the same time. Like
there is this issue. Yeah. Everyone has been away now, and now we're all coming back, and I'm sure we'll get a much more flow on things and much more work done. Yeah.
And maybe a new kernel as well, a new operating system.
Oh, we never know what happens.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah. So hello guys. I just coming. I don't know if you already talk for the plan for UI extension that compete with EXTJS or GWT. So it looks like we're going to be, doing a lot of stuff with web components in the future. That's definitely something we're looking into a lot, and it'll be interesting to see web components, be they written in JavaScript or Dart working together. And I think that web components might be, the place where we have a nice interface. So
that'd be nice.
Yeah. So any plans for native animation and interpolation like jQuery? I don't think that these guys would answer this question, but I think that, this might be a perfect case. I don't know if we're doing it, but, that sounds like a really good thing to have as a third-party library. And so you out there, please code it. And then the next question, can server-side Dart code call server-side Java APIs?
Well, we do have the native extension API. They could presumably embed a Java VM, and
I know people who do this kind of stuff, and I always think they're crazy when they embed multiple VMs. That sounds painful.
I mean, right now our primary interface is from Dart to C.
Okay.
But I don't know in the future. I right now clearly it's not. There's no out of the box solution or there's no off-the-shelf solution that does this kind of thing.
Yeah, I have a suspicion that, of course, the Dart has its own VM. It is not the JVM, and so, embedding those things, it's not trivial, and I think that maybe a better plan is to do something outside of that space, like a RESTful web service or something like that.
Don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so we are out of questions, and I know that we're going to get kicked out of the studio pretty soon because Wednesday is like the busiest day, and like everyone wants to have.
I thought of one more thing I'd like to tell people. Look for a new stack trace format from the VM.
Wow.
Yeah. So far, the stack traces have been very, very ugly. They have lots of extra characters and really hard to read. And I checked in today a new version of stack traces, so as your programs crash, it should be more pleasant for you from now on.
I've never seen a stack trace that I really thought, wow, this is just pleasant.
A beautiful, pleasant. No, it isn't pleasant. It's never pleasant to get a stack trace, but at least they should be legible, right?
Yeah.
So that I decided that needed to change. I'll let you go back to what you're saying.
Yeah, well, that's great, and especially C++ back traces. I mean,
they can be bad.
Yeah, just a little bit.
But we were exposing internal names for things, so they'd see things in the stack traces that wouldn't necessarily even make sense from a Dart language perspective. It's really important that the stack trace actually be something that you can understand from a Dart language level, and it have nice white space in it, so you can parse it with your eyes. That kind of thing.
Okay, so for you C++ programmers out there, this is the guy to thank.
No, it's not the C++. It's the Dart stack trace.
Sorry. Dart stack trace.
I'm talking about the Dart language stack traces.
Okay. Well, now we can all love you.
Yeah, that's the plan. That's the goal.
Okay. So that's fantastic. Thank you guys for coming. This was a great show. Thank you for visiting, and thank you for taking all my questions.
Sure.
We will see you guys next time. 2 weeks from now, we're still debating on which day we might be moving to Thursdays in the morning. I know that a lot of Europeans missed this, but this was the only time we had free in the studio. But we'll announce the our episode of Dartisans. Thanks a lot, guys.